Welcome to The Plunge, a cryo-EM podcast from Mimi, Mike, and Liz, sponsored by Thermo Fisher Scientific.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of The Plunge. My name is Liz Kellogg. I'm at Cornell University. We have Mimi Ho from Columbia, and we have Mike Gianfranco from University of Michigan. And today we're going to be interviewing Bridget Carragher, who is a longtime pioneer and leader in the cryo-EM field, and we're really excited to have her come talk to us. So one of the first things, I thought about in, talking to you today, right, and having you come on is, since we're all very young group leaders, we just started our groups. I love to see the success of my trainees. I would love to see them go on and do big things, and a lot of amazing people have really come out of your group, and I think that's a testament to the culture that you've built up. So do you have any advice for us as group leaders in kind of fostering the development of our trainees that enable them to go on and do great things?
That's a great question. And I think the first thing I'd say is remember to have some humility, because sometimes your trainees are a lot smarter than you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think in my case, that has almost always been the case. We've had some astonishing people come through the group, and many of them, I think the majority have gone on to incredible positions and real, leaders in the science community. But I'm not sure we did much to enable them. I think they were just so terrific, and we were very lucky to have had them in the group. I think the group has been lucky because we do something that's slightly unusual, and we attract very technical-minded people, who do great biology, but also are fascinated by the technology. So we've been lucky to attract those kinds of sort of astonishing unicorns, I think, for some of the time.
Mm-hmm. But I guess along those lines, with people coming in who are really motivated, I guess as a mentor, how do you, get out of the way? Or how do you not prevent them from, exploring their ideas?
How do you support them?
Yeah, because if they are coming in with lots of ideas on momentum, how do you, or give them boundaries or guidance or monitoring? I think,
really great people will run with things, and all you have to do is give them a crumb, and then they turn it into a whole loaf of bread. That's the greatest of them. That's always the case. You feel like awestruck by. You have one tiny little idea, and then they come back with 73 more, Mm-hmm. I think also the group is very much team science. Our group has always worked as a team. I mean, people have their individual projects, but I hope the culture of the group has always been for the greater good of everybody, and everybody's nurturing everybody else, and everybody's delighted by the group having success. It's not just individual success that counts, but the success of the whole team. And then I think that sort of self-enables people, because then they work together and they're excited by each other's projects, and they collaborate and cooperate together. Mm-hmm, yeah. At least I hope that's true. You'll have to ask them.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned that, because we did ask one of them earlier. So Melody, we interviewed Melody earlier, and she was mentioning that one of the things that was great about being a PhD student in your group was actually that you guys provided amazing resources in terms of obviously instrumentation and all of that, but also really, really technically strong people. I don't think all of us had access to that as PhD students in a different environment, right? And so she was saying that it was really great to be a PhD student and have access to all of these people that are working really much, very, very much experts on the technical side of things.
Right. And also as a team, so...
Exactly.
I think one of the most important things for any group, the PhD students are often superstars, but every member of that team is a superstar in their own way. We have people in the lab who are just, the technical people doing amazing work, enabling everybody else, and as valuable as everybody else in the group. So I think it's terribly important to value everybody making a contribution, especially if you do this to kind of team science as opposed to individual science. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope that's true, that we enable people by creating an environment where everybody is valued, because if everybody's valued, then they're doing a great job, and they're excited by what they do, and they feel happy to come to work, So that's a very important part, I think, of running a team. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess going along with that, like probably like celebrating everybody's success, right?
Right. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of like traditions or special, things that you do to celebrate the success of people in your lab? Do you have any traditions that along those lines?
We don't actually, and I've often thought, I've seen on Twitter or something, somebody opening champagne for a great science paper or something, and we haven't done that much. But I wonder, and I think maybe it's because we're sloppy and haven't gotten around to it, but I also think because everything counts. It's not just the science paper, it's also doing a great technical feat of getting something to work. Or, today somebody sent us Slack. They had completely cleaned up one of the Krios rooms and organized it to the nth degree, and it looked beautiful. And that makes everybody else's life easier. So I think, you have to celebrate everything, and you can't just say, oh, it's only the Cell Nature Science papers that we open the champagne for. It's every single thing that everybody does in the group every day. So Clint does run highlights every week, and every week we say, what are the highlights of the week? And, it could be we got something done, or all the microscopes were up all week, or we had visitors, or we ran a course, or we did this, or do this. So we do try and do those highlights at least.
That's a really great idea.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to steal it.
Yeah. I mean, because it's not like you can open a bottle of champagne every single day. So
exactly.
You cannot.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess one thing that I was excited that you were going to be joining us, because I wanted to ask you, I mean, you have really gone from strength to strength in terms of you have done a lot of different positions, and I feel like every single one of them you've been better than the previous. So you've continued to improve. And so I guess a couple of questions. So first, kind of how do you handle those transitions? Because obviously moving jobs is hard. Like, we've all done this recently, and it's starting over from scratch is hard, right? And then I think the other question that I had was, how do you have that sense of when it's a good time to move on to a different position?
Well, let's start with the second question first. It's a good question, because I have to say every job I've had, I've loved.
Yeah.
I loved the job at Illinois. We were at the Beckman Institute doing multidisciplinary things, and we went to Scripps and had a fantastic time at Scripps. And then we moved to New York, and New York is amazing. And now we're moving on to, help create this imaging institute for the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. And each one of those moves has been very hard to leave the one behind, because I've never been unhappy in my job. I've always loved whatever I do. Maybe that's that's how you start a new thing, to love it, to really want to do it. But why you move, I think, is for the challenge. Every one of those moves has been an enormous challenge in its own way. And I think that's what I like to do. And everybody probably knows Clint and I have been, business partners for, I don't know, maybe 30 years now. We've done it together, and I think we like to build things. Once it's built, then you're just like, well, I wonder what the next challenge is. So I think that's what has happened in those various moves, because we have moved quite a bit. And this is the latest move now.
Okay.
And maybe, how do you get started? I just don't know too much, don't think too much.
One step at a time, maybe?
Yeah.
One step at a time, just go for it and hope for the best.
Yeah. So I guess people can predict when they're going to lose you, which is a huge loss, obviously, for New York. It's going to be a big loss for New York. They can predict when you're going to lose you when they can see that things have evened out.
Maybe 10 years or so.
And so I guess it's kind of related to you moving and changing institutions and developing new resources, algorithms. I feel like for new faculty, our research feels like a sprint where we're trying to get things rolling, but eventually it becomes a marathon. And so what's your advice to people who are in this field long term? We're going to be working. Does it always feel like a sprint, or do you feel like you hit a stride? And is it, I guess the teams are changing too, but what are your thoughts on that, as far as sort of, especially technology wise, where it is changing and it's hard to keep up, but you keep moving? I
think you need a mixture. Sometimes some things you're sprinting on, some things are marathon. Some things are mature and you're building on it and it's great and the whole team's on it and working to it. And then other things are so new and you don't know what's going on, and you're trying something and you're trying to get it booted up, and it's exciting and new and you want to be first to some extent, whereas other things are mature and that's your niche, and you can make contributions and keep pushing. And maybe you need a mixture of those. You need things that are pushing you and brand new and nobody else has done it, and then things that are your niche and that you're good at. Because you need to also have a bit of a relaxer down some of the times and feel like that's what we do. That's what we can contribute and be comfortable with that. So, but you need a little bit of both. Otherwise, you might get a little bit too in the groove and not try something new.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it feels like, especially early on, at some point we'll probably see the long-term projects emerge, but when you're starting, it's like you can't tell. Yeah. And that's probably also the issue is like you're not sure which is going to solidify into the long-term marathon.
I guess maybe that's why it feels like a sprint, because we're trying to solidify all these things at once.
I think so. I mean, I just have had a lot of senior people tell me, like, remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you have to pace yourself. And I'm like, okay. And then I don't know what that means.
But all three of you are known for something already. We all know what you do. The whole field knows what you do. So you already have your niches. Don't be so modest, I think. Everybody knows what you three people do. So you've already got your niche and you've already found a groove. You may find many more and it may become bigger and all the rest of it, but don't underestimate what you've already achieved.
That's very kind of you to say.
Not kind, I'm honest. I was just thinking as you said that, well, I know what you do, I know what you do, I know what you do, so what are you talking about, Mike?
That's fair. So I guess, obviously the big question on everyone's minds, and definitely on our minds, is you're moving to this really big, really exciting new challenge, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. You guys are starting it in the Bay Area. I don't know if you guys have figured out where you're going to be yet. So kind of like when I talked to you a few weeks ago, you said you guys were kind of still thinking about where you wanted to go. It's very new still. So do you guys know more about, what direction you're taking it in? What are your kind of hopes and dreams for that? And also, let's start with that.
So we don't know enough yet. It's very, very new. We don't even know where the institute itself will be located. We're scoping out space and buildings and all the rest of it, and just spent a delightful week at the CZI main headquarters getting to know a whole bunch of people. Clint, David and I are working on a roadmap to try and scope out some of this. This is the Imaging Institute. It's going to be called the Chan Zuckerberg Institute for Advanced Biological Imaging, but we're going to call it the Imaging Institute because that's too long.
That's a pretty long name.
So the Imaging Institute will eventually have 3 grand challenges, and this is the first of them. And it's really to understand the cell at molecular scale, which, shorthand in our field is cryo-ET, but that means everything from labeling and super resolution light microscopy and identifying a target of interest and cutting the lamella and getting the cryotomograms and processing them and segmenting them and annotating them and getting them into a database. So that's a very long pipeline, and as we all know, with huge gaps, right? Cryo-ET is many years behind single particle cryo-EM, which is now so mature it can be offered as a service, and these commercial companies doing that, these national centers doing that, and there's more to be done. That's true, but that is really one of those marathon things where we've succeeded, I think, and mostly it works. And you can improve things at any point of the pipeline. We're trying to do smart data collection now, take the burden off the operator more, and everything else is being highly automated. But for cryo-ET, I think every point of that pipeline is bottlenecked, as Mimi probably knows better than anybody in this room. And you can collect data, but then you're drowning in data, and months or sometimes years could go by. And so how do we fix all that? How do we go about doing it? And single particle wasn't so great 5 years ago, or 10 years ago is maybe fair to say. That first project Melody Campbell, you talked to earlier, worked on where we got to sub-3 on the proteasome.
Right.
And I think they spent 3 months doing that computing. We had a workshop coming up, and we collected this data that we thought was very good data. But in those days, the computing was so slow. It took us 3 months, and they were trying to beat the clock to get that thing sub-3 before the workshop. And every week they would write on the window, in pen, what resolution. You saw 3.6, 3.5, 3.4. As per iteration, we watched this go by, with days and weeks in between. And that's what computing was like then. And we had begged scripts for every CPU they could possibly scrounge up to give to us. And now, of course, a few hours on a few GPUs and you'd be done with that whole thing. So
we hope did talk about that.
Oh, she did. Okay,
we talked about it.
Yeah, that's interesting because we were all watching that. It's like, oh, we're going to make it. Because at the time, the field gets trapped into these things. At the time, there was a 3 angstrom barrier.
Yeah, right.
What is this barrier? Why would there be a barrier there? The microscopes are capable of 1.5 angstrom. So we didn't believe it, and we thought it was just a matter of collecting better data, and that's what we went after. We wanted to show, prove that, but we wanted to make it in time for that workshop, and we did. And she gave a fantastic talk at that workshop. Yeah,
I'm kind of really curious, just listening to when you were talking about that. So I think you guys probably started a little bit earlier than me, but when I first came in, it was right after the Resolution Revolution, and so I think I came in at the point when cryo-EM was becoming more accessible. It wasn't to the way it is now, where it's completely, I feel like it's mostly democratized now. But it was starting, that had already kind of started. And so I didn't get to see the hard part, I guess, of single particle when we were really at the place where we are now with cryo-ET. And so I'm kind of curious, cryo-ET does feel like there's tons of bottlenecks, there's obstacles everywhere, and it feels really, really big compared to single particle. You having kind of lived through it, do you think that the level of the challenge for cryo-ET is the same as the level of the challenge for single particle back then, or do you think there's more to it?
I think you're right. It feels harder right now.
Yeah.
But there are similar challenges. At one time, making a grid was very difficult, and picking particles, you had to do it by hand, and everything took a very, very long time, and we were stuck at very, very low resolution. 15 angstroms was great, right?
Yeah.
Blobs were okay. So we were so far away from where we are now. I think, I know it does feel harder.
It does.
But I'm not sure it is harder. I think
give
us 10 years and see where we are. Look at what happened in the last 10 years in single particle. I don't think any of us would have dreamed that we were at this point, 1.2 angstroms.
But I guess with single particle, part of it seemed super hard, it seemed like it wasn't going to be achievable, and part of getting it to the point where it was, there were these 2 big breakthroughs, right, that happened, the direct electron detector, and then also, I think,
algorithmic
development. Exactly. And so do you think that for cryo-ET, it's going to take something like that, or do you think that what we already have the wherewithal now and we just have to crunch through it?
Oh, you mean just advances at every single step just to...
Yeah, or is it going to take something like a new detector or something like that?
I always like to say the resolution revolution, the cameras get the credit, but there were many things that happened before the cameras, right? The microscopes got very, very, very good. They're so much better than they were 30 years ago. The cameras got very good. The software got amazing. There was a ton of automation added to it. Now we collect 10,000 images. We don't think twice about it. There were many steps along the path, and the camera was the final cherry on the top. And so it gets all the credit. But if the camera had come 10 years ago and there wasn't any software to do anything with these images, the software might have been the thing that got all the credit, the final breakthrough. So it was a series of steps at every point that everybody contributed to right throughout the community. And the Nobel Prize was given for specimen prep, instrumentation and processing, and I think that's fair. All 3 of those are crucial and critical to the field, and they all happened at different rates. So it wasn't just one thing that broke this open. One thing without the other things, it wouldn't have been there, I think. It would have had perfect cameras 30 years ago, but not perfect microscopes or any software or hardware or computing, and then that wouldn't have worked either. So I think the same thing, I hope, will happen with cryo-ET. Labeling will get better. We could get laser phase plates, we hope, or something like that, to really improve our contrast. I think machine learning is going to play a huge role in that whole segmentation and figuring out what's in there.
Yeah.
So all of those things will work along for a few years, and then maybe all be ready, and then one of them will be the final thing. It's like, oh, that was the hero. You know, like, well, no, all these other heroes worked away for 10 or 20 years prior to that, getting all of this done. You know, so until finally it seems easy, but it's a huge amount of work from so many people until it looks like it's easy.
Yeah, no, that's actually really encouraging, because I think that then, I mean, it means that like we can get there if we like take it one step at a time incrementally. We will get there, as opposed to thinking that we, no matter what we do, we have to wait around for some big breakthrough before we can make it, right? So that's actually really encouraging to hear.
I don't think so. I mean, we need factors of 10 here or there, but we could get that factor of 10 with a 2 and a 3 and a 2, you know?
Right.
So if everything could just become a little better here and there, and we could get a little bit more contrast, and we could have good algorithms to pull information out of this data, all of that, you know, could get us to the point where we just can query, we can come in with a question and say, can I ask this question of my cell? Can I find that molecule, that complex in my cell, and, you know, ask a biological question and then iterate, which is what we all want to do. Right. But as you know, I mean, that's so hard, it's so slow and so painful right now, that's not something that's easy. But I hope that was the case with single particles. You couldn't walk in with a GPCR and say, I'd like a structure. I mean, it's like, no, you know, you can get a negative stain of it and send it to the synchrotron. But, you know, I think we will get there. Yeah, I am an optimist. That's the other thing that helps changing jobs, being optimistic.
Yeah.
When you're starting from scratch thinking, what, you have to be optimistic, I think. And our field should be very optimistic, because, wow, you know, who would have thought this 30 years ago, 35 years ago when we were starting out, or even 10 years ago, to be honest. 2012, we're still doing blobs, right?
Right.
And now, you know, amazing.
Yeah. What an optimistic vision of the future. Because we talk about these issues all the time amongst ourselves. You know, we always wonder how we can be better mentors, better leaders. You know, how do we build up our communities? So, yeah, I don't know. We just think about it a lot, I guess.
Yeah. We definitely talk a lot about it between us, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice to talk to people.
It's important to enjoy it, though, you know, and have some fun. Because if you're worrying all the time, why aren't I better, or how could I improve this, or how could I do this better? Don't forget, you're doing amazing jobs, and it should be enormous fun. And, you know, the field is great, the community is great. I think they have a really nice community.
Yeah.
In my opinion,
Absolutely.
Cryo-EM has always been a good community. And, you know, you should really try and enjoy it. But I know I was anxious too at 4-H. But it's a pity we can't, you know, be less anxious and just enjoy every minute of it as we go along doing these amazing things.
Yeah. But I do think that, like, having friends and comrades definitely helps with the anxiety, because at least you can share the anxiety, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. And also understand you're not alone, and everybody feels like that. Everybody has imposter syndrome, right? Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm certainly having a large dose of that right
No,
now.
I don't believe you. Don't believe you at all.
I mean, if you have imposter syndrome, there's really no hope for
Believe
it.
me, everybody does. Right? It's inevitable. Yeah. Also, there's so much out there. I don't know if you follow the literature. It's like a barrage of fantastic work coming out. It feels like every day there's 5 more papers that you're awestruck by and feel I ought to read that, you know. So the field is very on fire, especially the cryotomography, I think.
Yeah.
It's proceeding very rapidly, so I think things will change quite rapidly. I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interest, of course, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exciting and scary at the same time, which I feel like is how you know that you're doing something good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
That is different. You guys have a lot more pressure than I did, certainly at my age, because nobody cared about cryo. We're total backwater. You know, 100 groups in the whole world did it. Nobody really cared, you know. So we kind of had fun doing our thing. But now everybody cares, so the pressure is much higher, I think. Yeah, and there's a lot more competition, a lot more people doing it. So the pool of people that you're competing against has become much larger. Mm-hmm. So I think that is more pressure and more anxiety on you. But it's also more fun.
Yeah.
You know, when we were doing it, nobody really cared what cryo-EM was, or
Yeah.
I wonder if though, I mean, if I may, like it's a little bit about having everything accessible at the fingertips, right? I mean, now literature is getting released as preprints,
Yeah,
right?
that's
And then,
right.
so it's becoming faster and faster too, and more accessible, which is a great thing. But it also, you know, I think contributes to the feeling that there's a lot of competition, a lot of pressure, right? So, yeah.
Just to know, though, that you can work in your own area and make a contribution in your own area. You know, if you know what you want to do and you put your head down and you do it, you know, yes, you always think everybody else has done it, but everybody's making their own contribution. You know, even if somebody's doing something similar, they will never do it, I think, quite the way you will. So just do your thing and get it out there and, you know, make that impact. I think that counts, you know, and don't worry so much about the competition and the comparison, you know.
Great advice. Very good advice. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming, Bridget. This has been great.
It's been really terrific being here, and it's an honor talking to you young uns, you know, who are the future of the field. So well done doing this. I think it's a really great idea. I hope you continue it, and you know, there's a whole series of them.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for The Plunge. This has been a ton of fun. If you want more information or to see the episodes, please follow us on Twitter or check us out at thermofisher.com/cryo-EM-podcasts.
Thanks for listening to The Plunge, a cryo-EM podcast from Mimi, Mike, and Liz, sponsored by Thermo Fisher Scientific.